Thank you for joining the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston for our weekly online Ministers Forum. I'm the Reverend Dr. Colin Bossen, Senior Minister of the congregation. These programs are conversations with community organizers, scholars, religious leaders, artists, and others about how we can collectively address the present crises. Their purpose is to offer members of our community and all who wish to join us online science-based resources and liberation-oriented inspiration to get us through these difficult times. Today I'm joined by Chelsea Wade. We'll be talking about homelessness here in Houston. Chelsea is a Strategic Gifts Officer for Search Homeless Services. A graduate of Lake Forest College, she's been working for Houston area nonprofits and religious communities for more than a decade. For those of you who are with us for the first time, let me say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. We are a religious tradition that celebrates the possibility of goodness within each human heart, the transformative power of love, and the clarifying force of reason. We believe we need not think alike to love alike. We hope that you find these forums a source of connection, hope, and clarity. Chelsea, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and to talk about Search.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you. And I wonder if you could just start out by giving us an overview of the housing crisis in Houston and what the homeless population in the city looks like.
Sure. So I'd like to begin by touching on the Coalition for the Homeless annual point in time count. That is a really important reference point for us. And so in 2020, there were 3,974 individuals who were experiencing homelessness in the greater Houston area at the time of the count. So compared to last year's number, the numbers have stayed relatively flat. But the great thing about that number is that it represents a 53% decrease in overall homelessness since 2011. So we really like to highlight our progress in that regard. And we credit that success to our Way Home collaboration here in Houston. And the Way Home is a community-wide partnership that we have going on. There are numerous partners involved in this strategic approach. And so we realize that it's important to be strategic and to stay on track to serve our community through that. The other important part that I'd like to focus on is that Houston is leading the way compared to other major US cities. And these efforts are highlighted, and we're just so proud of our work. And we think that it's so important to continue a strategic approach. It's really important for everyone involved with the Way Home to focus on their strengths and their assets and what sets them apart as homeless service providers in our community.
I think it's just fantastic to actually hear some good news for a change. I mean, I feel like
right.
There's so much bad news right now.
Sure.
To hear like, hey, Houston is actually figuring out how to deal with homelessness to some extent.
Yes.
Is like, or making like that's just great. I'm wondering, so this annual count that you do, is that people? How does that take place?
I mean, so it is a huge effort, and it takes so many hands on deck to make that happen. And so we've got our employees who are involved, many other agencies who are involved, and they all come together to organize, and it's a specific process on how that all happens. And so that's really the major part of how we get that data. So it's improved over the years, and it's just amazing to see so many people mobilize in that effort.
Well, it's a very important thing to be able to have that kind of census data year in and year out, so you can really track progress. And I guess so Houston's made this progress in dealing with homelessness, and the question that really immediately comes to mind is like, why? What has been done differently over the last 10 years or so that's really changed things to see this improvement?
So a major part of that change really shifted when we changed to a housing first model. It's very difficult to stabilize your life if you don't have a home base or some semblance of a consistent environment. So Houston's approach in years past focused on telling people to get a job first or to get clean first, and then they would receive housing. but it's just really difficult to do those things if you don't have a place to call home. So the housing first model is a major reason why things have changed.
And is that model not being used so much in other cities? Is that one reason why you see such a difference between Houston and, I'm guessing, places like Dallas or San Antonio? Or
That's a great question. There are certainly different approaches, but a lot of it seems to be because of a duplication of services. I mean, there are so many agencies who, they want to do the right thing and they want to do things the way that they want to do them.
Mhm.
That has been a major part of one of the reasons search is so ahead.
Mhm.
We are willing to look at our results and look at the services we're providing, and we are willing to improve them and change them and really move forward and progress in order to serve our clients. And so that's a major difference, I would say.
So flexibility and collaboration, it sounds like, are really key to the success.
Sure. Yes, and certainly introspection and
Mhm.
just looking at results. The data is important. And so we also know that, in recent years, the optics have not been in our favor. We've had an increase in encampments, and it's just been incredible to see all of our different partners come together to go out and reduce those numbers and subsequently close several encampments in the city.
So when you're doing this count, is that you're just counting street homelessness, or are you counting like people who are, um, sort of staying here, between places, couch surfing or whatever? Because you just said sort of reducing encampments, which are, I guess, increasing. So like, how does that kind of figure into the dynamic?
So, in terms of the encampments increasing, it's really about, we noticed that when several developments, especially in the downtown area, when several developments, well, were developed, it ended up causing people to be displaced.
Mm,
So many of the individuals that you saw in these encampments were really there. They were already there, but when you've got more of a covering or buildings that are obstructing those areas, it wasn't as obvious. And
okay.
so it just it's a matter of displacing people. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we noticed a lot more encampments coming up. And many of those encampments provided the sense of community that we try to foster in
Hmm.
our own programs. There's a sense of community there and a sense of comfort. And so that is a major reason.
It sounds like development in Houston shifts the dynamics around homelessness a lot. And I'm wondering, well, in terms of homelessness itself, or ending up homeless, could you talk a little bit about how people end up homeless?
Sure, that's a really great question, and we really like to talk about that because there's a sense that everyone on the street is there because of a substance abuse issue or some sort of mental health issue, but overwhelmingly we see that people have lost their job. They might have a change in family status. There's also the situation of domestic violence, incarceration. It could be eviction by a family member. So there are just so many dynamics. It's a very complex issue. And so there are just so many reasons why a person can end up homeless. And I'm sure many people notice that there are panhandlers who are on the street, and every person who is panhandling is not necessarily a homeless individual. And so that that's another point that we like to mention.
Hmm. Right, that makes sense. So I think that you and I talked a little while ago about how there is sort of a housing crunch or housing crisis in Houston, and what I think the statistic that I've heard is that 19 out of every 100 families who need low-income housing are able to find it. I don't know if that's the statistic that you have, but can you talk about how the sort of housing situation is either feeding in one way or another to homelessness here?
Sure. So as you know, affordable housing is a really important topic. It's one that Houston certainly is attempting to address, as well as other cities. There are several statistics, but the fact is, we are just based on the point in time, count numbers alone, we're realizing that there's certainly a demand for permanent housing. And it's certainly the demand is exceeding our community's supplies and resources right now. And so it's really important to increase affordable housing. It's also important for us to advocate for our clients. We've got to find landlords who are willing to house our tenants. And it's also important for us to advocate for funding for our homeless population.
We're in the middle of this horrifying pandemic, and we're talking about homelessness. And I know that there are people who are being threatened with eviction um, all over the country, but here in Houston, I know there's a moratorium on eviction according to the CDC, but that hasn't necessarily fully stopped it. Um, so I'm wondering if you could talk about how the pandemic has impacted both homelessness, the homeless population, and like the prospect of people becoming homeless.
Sure. So we have certainly received an increase in inquiries from individuals in the community as a result of the pandemic. There are emails, phone calls. We even have individuals reaching out on social media telling us that they've lost their job, that they are about to be homeless. Many families who are really frightened about what will come next in their lives. And so we are working all together as an agency to respond to those inquiries and to also give out referral information as it comes up.
So, and you've seen a sort of increase in terms of demand, but what about, I mean, I guess the question is, right, so like a lot of homeless people, and maybe you don't have the answer to this, but who are out on the street might not have the ability to have protective equipment, personal protective equipment, or socially distance, or might not be able to take a lot of the sanitary precautions that people are supposed to be taking right now. We hope people are taking right now. How is that being impacted? How is that part of the population being impacted by the pandemic, or if you know?
Sure. So our mobile outreach team really increased efforts to distribute items to assist at this time. So certainly hand sanitizer, masks. We are so fortunate that we have received so many in-kind donations during this time. And so we've been very fortunate to hand out soap and again, sanitizer, masks, items like that. And to also share information about why it's important to distance and to also maintain to the level that an individual can, of course, to make sure that they are being safe.
Okay. Well, I guess we had talked about kind of policy or wanting to touch on policy as part of this conversation. So, what policies in particular does Search advocate that the city take on that it hasn't taken on, or continue with that it is working on to sort of address the homeless situation here in Houston?
So, for us, the biggest policy that we advocate for at this time involves our participation in the way home. We think it's so important to address homelessness as a community. We have to have community wide efforts, and we can see the results of having this sort of collaboration, and so we want to continue this. We also think it's important to have a seat at the table and maintain communication with our local politicians and other entities that need to know how to address homelessness. We also work on having a good rapport with businesses that are in the area and that certainly have an interest in making sure that the population is addressed. And so we certainly understand that, and we just want to continue having those conversations.
Really pursuing public-private partnerships seems like key to kind of
That's key.
key.
and just having representation, having many voices
Mhm.
heard as we're trying to approach the complexity of this issue.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it speaks to why Houston has seen a decrease in homelessness is if there's a strong partnership across the city to address the issue. I'm sure that that makes a huge difference. So your search is, I know, at the heart of a lot of this work, and I'm wondering if you could just talk about what search is and the kind of work you all do.
Sure. So we were founded in 1989, and we've always been dedicated to serving those who are homeless. We think it's important to address homeless individuals with compassion, dignity, and respect. And we've evolved. We originated as an organization. It was essentially a day shelter.
Mm.
We had laundry services. We were providing meals. We had provided a mailing address for individuals who didn't have one. And so we've really had our kind of beginnings in many of the services that other organizations are doing now. And so for us, it's about providing quality case management.
Mhm.
We feel like that's where our strength lies. It's really important to help homeless individuals and families regain their self sufficiency. And so we focus on having skilled staff members who can engage individuals on the street, as I mentioned,
Mhm.
and guiding them on the path to getting into housing, increasing their income, and we really want to focus on improving their mental and physical health, housing stability, and a connection to community. So it's really moved beyond a provision of basic services. It's really so much more than that. And we also serve the youngest victims of homelessness at our House of Tiny Treasures. And that is our preschool for children whose families are or who have been homeless. So we want to take those steps to make sure they can succeed in life and to also make sure that their parents can go back to school or work so that they can get their lives on track.
And I know that that's super important because all the stuff that I've read has indicated that like kids who have an experience of homelessness during their childhood as adults they end up having being a lot more vulnerable to a lot of different things, and a lot harder time kind of making it. So providing that stability is just an incredible gift that you all are providing to people in the city. And I'm wondering if you could, give us maybe a story or an example of kind of tracking someone from through the sort of case management system. If you have any kind of like success stories, like what does that look like for people? And yeah, because I think a lot of times, like we've been talking a lot about, you know, I mean, a little bit more abstractly, and I think it helps people to get an idea of like concretely kind of what people's lives look like and how they're improved through the services you offer.
Sure. So, there are so many stories of resilience, and it's just really incredible to think about what our clients have experienced. And so many of them have just encountered obstacles that we can't even begin to fathom. And so I think it would be great to share a story. Let me think of a really great one that I'll share with you. And there are just so many. So I think I will talk about the Hay family. So Wendy fled an abusive relationship and she found herself homeless in Houston with her four young girls. She herself was battling severe mental illness. She was trying to cope and she just felt lost, alone, and hopeless. Then she found out about Search and our House of Tiny Treasures. So Wendy enrolled her children at HTT, and she had the opportunity to attend college. She obtained a business degree, all while working full time. And her children were just thriving. I mean, just absolutely thriving. And they went on to be in gifted and talented programs at their school. And she was just an incredible example. And she says that Search really got her on the right path and she really just needed someone to care.
Mhm.
A lot of times, our individuals that we talk to, they just want someone to believe in them. and to really show them that they can accomplish those things. And so I think Wendy's a great example of that.
Thank you for sharing. That's a powerful story. So I think the reason why we're doing this week is because we're coming up on World Homeless Day and / weekend, and First Church, as one of the organizations that supports Search, always does something around that every year. And so, since we're not meeting in person, it seemed like an opportunity to do something to observe World Homeless Day. And I just wonder if you could talk a bit about what that is and kind of what that looks like in terms of the work that people do in Houston during that time.
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much just for allowing us to share our work and realizing how important this is. So, World Homeless Day is celebrated every year in October. There are cities all over who observe World Homeless Day. And the purpose is to draw attention to the needs of people experiencing homelessness. It's also to provide opportunities for communities to get involved and really be a part of the response. And so, Search, we are not planning on just celebrating one day. We like to celebrate for a weekend. So World Homeless Weekend is this weekend, October 9th through the 11th. And Search and our Council of Congregations are working with faith groups all over the Houston area. And the idea is for congregations to do one thing to raise awareness. So those could involve service opportunities, to pray, and really to advocate for some of the most marginalized and vulnerable members of our city. And so there are different examples of involvement. Some faith communities are actually having service projects, some of which are virtual, kind of remote opportunities, if you will, in-kind donation collections, saying specific prayers, featuring speakers on homelessness, and being committed to sharing information about homelessness with their community. So it's just a wonderful weekend that we look forward to.
Well, thank you. I don't know, Chelsea, if we still have a little bit of time, if you have anything else you'd like to add, but I found this to be a very helpful conversation and really appreciate the work that you all are doing.
Thank you so much. Well, for us, it's just so important to have the visibility. We've been focused on our programs and services for so long, so it's really nice for us to be able to share that work.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us. If you found this video to be helpful, please consider joining us for our weekly worship service. It's posted online each Sunday at 10:30 a.m. and features music and prayers, in addition to a sermon. This week's service is titled Foundations. Thank you to our staff for making this video possible. It was produced by Christian Holmes. Alma Viscarra assisted with the editing. We'll see you all online soon and in person as soon as it's possible for us to gather again. And please remember that no matter how isolated you feel, we are all in this together.